Today, governmental control of knowledge is getting eroded by increasing resilience, giving promise for freedom of information and speech. Your host is Rick Falkvinger, and this is Liberties Report.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Good evening and welcome to Liberties Report Week 15, 2015. Some positive news for once, or rather, signs of light in the famous tunnel. We've all heard of BitTorrent, the protocol used for sharing culture. There's also BitTorrent, the company, BitTorrent Inc., who use these protocols for commercially viable applications. And last week, BitTorrent Inc. announced one such application that has immense ramifications for freedom of speech. Called Project Maelstrom. It is a web browser that doesn't use regular HTTP, possibly proxied, but rather uses BitTorrent protocol as its web transport. And this has enormous ramifications, as we've seen censorship being hammered down from government after government, from court after court, and at the end of the day, the internet, sad to say, was kind of fighting a losing battle against the old world here. However, we've also seen how effective these courts have been at trying to censor the unlicensed manufacturer of knowledge and culture, unlicensed manufacturer of music and movies, specifically using the BitTorrent protocol. Having BitTorrent transfer web pages effectively gets the web to be completely resilient to any governmental attempts of censorship. And frankly, that is a huge deal. Governments and courts have kind of lived in the old world here, where you can issue a court order against a choke point and have them lie to their subscribers against about what the world looks like. They have issued court orders for DNS servers to lie about the existence of a certain domain, like the piratebay.sc, for instance. However, using BitTorrent, the protocol, that becomes no longer possible. In that way, it is kind of like using Tor for web browsing, only Tor is quite technically elaborate still. It is getting better, it is certainly getting a lot better, but it is kind of a steep learning curve. The advantage here of having a web browser that just works and that is completely resilient is hard to overlook. Now, BitTorrent Inc. has a habit of releasing software as closed source, which is a problem, but if this takes off, I predict there's going to be an open source version of this BitTorrent browser, BitTorrent transport browser, within, well, at most a year or two. You can compare it to when Direct Connect became a popular protocol for sharing files, which was also a closed source, and a competitor called DC++, open, appeared very swiftly. My only concern with Project Maelstrom would be the name. Naming something after a current that sucks people in to drown and die is apparently not done by a public relations department. Still, doesn't matter what the name is, as long as it creates true freedom of information, freedom of speech. So, interestingly, BitTorrent started out as a freedom of information tool, and now it grows and evolves from there into a freedom of speech tool. There are other similar projects out there. MaidSafe is one of the most tip of the spear technology-wise. It is based on the blockchain, but it's much more further out because it needs to reinvent pretty much all technologies, the entire stack, from applications to transport to storage to everything. While Maelstrom from BitTorrent just changes the transport layer of the existing web, being a drop-in replacement, kind of like how Tor does. So what we can observe here is that there are multiple initiatives at this point to fight back against governmental attempts of censorship. Old guard trying to defend its power of narrative, frankly. This is not new. You've had FreeNet for some time, which also attempted to reinvent the entire stack and therefore was largely inaccessible, but whose philosophy understood it perfectly, saying that you cannot enforce the copyright monopoly at the same time as you defend freedom of speech. Therefore, any technology has to choose between defending freedom of speech or defending enforcement of the copyright monopoly. And FreeNet was very firmly on freedom of speech. What we are seeing now, however, is larger players starting to fight back against censorship. You have Google and others securing their VPNs against the National Security Agency, for instance. And what we can see is that while this fight has been activist, it is now going institutional. It is maturing, and we are seeing a big, organized pushback to take what used to be small activist mesh networks and making the entire web and the net uncensorable. And that would be a most welcome development. I'm Rick Falkvinge, and this is Liberties Report. Visit our sponsor, Private Internet Access. Good night.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Liberties Report is produced using exclusively free software.